Hi, this is campaign at Adtech, and today I'm with a person who honestly does not need any introduction, but I'm going to give one nonetheless. He is David Shing, and he's known as a digital prophet, and for all the right reasons. He helps us understand, or rather reminds us, what advertising and brand marketing should be in the current age when we are all driven by algorithms. David, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thanks for having me.
And I must say, I really loved your
Thank
sessions
you.
and I love the ads that you presented.
Uh-huh.
It was quite an insight. In fact, you mentioned this one sentence and I want you to dive a little deeper into it for our
Sure,
audience.
please.
You said you like brands, but not labels. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I like the subtlety of the character behind a brand, but the label itself isn't the thing that will be at the front of my cortex. If I think about a brand, it's really the experience that it gave me, and that's going to be the memory that I recall. Potentially not the iconography, potentially not the size of the logo, it's the experience. And I love the fact that one of those elements that people have is brand story. So people have great brand stories. I showcased them this morning. Yesterday was more about the elements of understanding that the world of intelligence is already here. So just don't fall into the trap of thinking that intelligence is going to be more important than the connection to the human. And so what I wanted to do this morning was showcase some of those sensorials, so whether it's sound, whether it's sight, whether it's even feel. There are sensorial elements of the human that you can tap into that will become potentially the brand or the brand story. I see too much of what we try and do is just confront center with logo, and that becomes the label of the brand. That's not what I'm looking for.
Okay, you said that is not what you're looking for, but today almost every brand, at least in contemporary times, is trying to build some kind of a legacy for itself. And that legacy dials down into the iconography that you mentioned.
Oh, for sure.
And if they were to try and build brand love, if they're trying to build a brand story, how would you advise them not to fall into the trap of chasing just conversion, chasing just numbers, for going down the garden path of algorithms?
Let me ask you a question. You work for a publication that's funded by advertising and sponsorship and subscriptions.
Correct.
With your ads, do advertisers within that domain still look for a click-through rate, or do they look for brand recall? I would argue that click-through rate is nothing that helps with performance today other than justify the spend. But if we talk about a frequency of stories that piece together through the ecosystem of somebody's day, like how you actually speak to me at 8 in the morning is different to how you speak to me at 8 at night, so you don't give me omni-channel, which is just another fancy word for saying putting your brand in different places across the media landscape. If you do it in a way that tunes my needs, then I'm going to recall it differently. So if you can do that and think about it less like an omni-channel and an ecosystem of needs, and how you have permission to be part of those needs throughout the day, that will give you longevity. Other than that, it's all about media spend, up or down, man. You want more media impressions, just spend more money and the volume goes up. You don't have that, impressions come down, volume comes down, you have less frequency. But if you tell great stories that people are going to remember, brand stories will have that legacy. Legacy is a word you brought up. Legacy, in my mind, is longevity. Longevity doesn't have to mean historically long time ago. I could bump into a brand experience today that will carry me far into the memory recall of that brand than any of the ads that I might see, for example. But it might have been an ad that I saw because it actually met me where I needed to be met, because it met a need for me at the right time throughout my ecosystem of my day.
So you mentioned that, and I'm also going to go back to one of the examples that you showed earlier in the panel, which was about the Coke bottle. You did not even show
The contour.
the
Yeah.
contour, right?
Uh-huh.
1912 is when the design
1911.
was. 1911, I'm standing corrected.
Yeah.
So 1911 is when the bottle was there. Now, if I were to just try and build a bit
that
of
wild?
context. Yeah, back then, how many beverages bottles were there? How many brands were there? So they were limited. So, if you wanted to build a brand story, it was that much easier. Also, the fact that meeting the consumer where they were was pretty much easier. You had TV, you had radio, you probably had a little bit of
Newspaper.
hoardings, newspapers. life was simpler, I would put it that way.
For sure.
Now it's not.
But think about the iconography there. That bottle's not just the shape, it's the color. It's green. The idea is it's smashed into 1,000 pieces on the ground, you'll still identify that as Coke. Fast forward today, where more is more, where we're consuming more things. It's harder to create that definition, yes, but if you carve something out, you're still able to create a nod to that definition. So that contour bottle still is relatable today. I see it on your set. There's a contour bottle right there, made of plastic. Is that interesting? Probably not so much. But what is interesting, in somewhere like the Philippines, what happened is that Coca-Cola replaced the bottle top. Instead of that being in the trash, which ends up in the ocean, that ends up in our food system, they replaced that bottle top with something useful, a pencil sharpener, a bubble blower, a water pistol. So that contour bottle goes from trash to iconography where I'm reusing it. So I have this theory that if your product is brilliant, then it's a matter of unearthing great stories that allow that product to be seen. If your product stinks, it doesn't matter how much you spend, it's not going to have longevity. So it's really down to the product first. So when you say there's a lot of products, yes, there are. There's millions of them. But if you solve a problem that is a need that somebody desires with your product, awesome. A product that's anti-Coke would be Liquid Death. But their advertising across Liquid Death is all about anti-beverages. And they create this sarcasm around the category. It's given them mind share. And I would argue that in this world, mind share is really what you want. And it's not about spending. It's about doing things that people recall and go, wow, I didn't see a million of their ads, but I saw something that really moved me. And that's where I got memory recall. It's not about spend, it's about mind share. Mind share is the new market share, in my opinion.
So, okay, if I were to again tie in to that, you said mind share is the new market share. But try explaining that in a boardroom where you have all the suits seated over there and saying, no, the market share is actually the numbers that we see on the stock exchanges. And they'll say, okay, mind share is good to have. It's not a must-have. We want to see how many units of the Coke bottle have you, or whichever other beverage bottle you managed to move. Or Oatly, you just showed some of the brilliant ads. I had never seen those, but they were hilarious. All right, some of them were downright hilarious.
Yeah, they are.
Now they can get the mind share, they can probably get the brand love, but how much is it really reflecting into sales and
It's at the very front end of the brand. So the consideration is that when I'm standing in the aisle, what am I going to decide to buy? So it's not everything. It's definitely a big part of it. Because if you suck at that front end part of it, then when I'm standing in the aisle, I'm just going to go, which one's on discount? Oh, I can buy 6 and I get 8. So I'm going to go for the performance that's on the aisle as opposed to how I got to the aisle. So there's all this work that has to happen. We would have traditionally called it a funnel. I called it the ecosystem because I think it's very, very different. And there are many platforms that allow you to get to those different architectures, but it really happens at the actual aisle. And by the way, if your product sucks, again, it doesn't matter about the amount of spend. And also, I think we think about in this vernacular as something quite masculine. You talked about KPIs being directed about number of units moved and market share by stockholder value. If you open a brand history by saying we wanted to build something that gives back incredible market share to our shareholders, and we just care about profits, then you're probably not going to survive. The fact that a brand was established because it solved a problem, and now because it's in a mass marketplace, it needs to actually move units, then moving units can happen with traditional spend. But if you want brand over time, you're going to have to do that differently. You have to meet people emotionally. It doesn't matter how much you spend. But it's really about those two elements of creativity, brand over time, sales overnight. Both are important, probably different creative. One thing I did not showcase in any presentation I do are banner ads. Keywords. I don't do the work of what I think the performance industry is doing. That's great. Optimization, that's terrific. But I really care about emotion and recall.
Okay. So, while you're talking about that, I'll dive into one of the things that you mentioned. Actually, I'll ask you yet another question. You had mentioned that having a strong POV is very important, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But do you think, CMOs can afford to have a strong POV when their budgets are constantly, and the market spends also, are constantly questioned and analyzed for outcome? So irrespective of whether they're trying to build it for, a brand for a long term, or they have to move the needle in the short term, everything that they do, whether they like it or not, is going to be questioned. So how do they convince the CFO, the CEO, the CIO?
They bring somebody like me in to convince them.
And how would you convince him?
Because the CFO is not, if I ask somebody, what's the first brand you remember?
Right now, Bisleri comes to mind.
What is it?
Bisleri. It's that bottle because you brought it in, you've seeded it in my mind.
And how did you get introduced to that bottle?
Hot summer, sunny day, and I was thirsty, and I just picked it up.
And somebody gave it to you, probably.
Yeah.
And so what happened there is that you have a story as to how you have a relationship with that, and you've been buying that for probably 20 years. And it's probably hard for you to switch to the competitor version of that. So I would argue that one of the ways you convince is just talk reality, man. It's not just about showing, I can show you some marketing charts that will be off the charts in terms of optimization. And that's going to save your job. But what about moving emotion in a way that says, if we continue this constant, and the budgets are consistent, I get it. But by the way, CMO is not a chief marketing officer anymore. They're a complex matrix observer. They've got to slice and dice all of these mechanisms and all these touch points very differently today and pick their battles. So if I was a CMO, I would say, look, here is where I'm going to spend that doesn't get me fired, and this budget I'm allocating to things that are actually going to move emotion differently because I think that's worth doing. And by the way, if we don't do it, somebody else is. And that somebody else is going to be our competitor, and you're going to come back to me and say, why didn't we do that? We didn't do that because you didn't allow me to have this budget that was outside of performance. So this amazing, optimized, innovation, creativity budget, that should be something that we work on. But too many CMOs are just playing it safe consistently. And that's the job protection program. And I'm okay for them, God bless them. But their brand is going to sit in the middle. In this decades moving forward of spending 3 or 4 hours on social in a country that has almost 1 billion people online, playing it safe means that you're in the middle of being forgotten. And if you're just going to be here for a moment, and that's how you're building your legacy, that's okay too. There are many platforms to do that. But I think it's best if brands are loved or hated, not liked.
Hated too. I mean, it's okay to be hated
Yeah,
because you're getting a lot of negative criticism as well. And,
Sure.
cancel culture is
Sure. Sure. Not everyone's going to love you. But if they
Okay.
hate you, it's like, great. And they're going to go in and they're going to comment. And they're going to talk about you in a way that says, I can't stand this brand, they stink. Great. That means I have a suspect. Could I turn that suspect into a prospect? I love your point of view. The fact you don't like my logo being red, fine. There's a better color. What do you think it should be? Is it the product you don't like? I mean, being liked, it's so easy and cheap to just go bing, 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 and forgotten. And then you come in and present and go, wow, look at this. We move the dial because we have more followers, we have more loves. Do you? Or do you not? So I would question that. I love looking at something in these channels where you've got, and I know YouTube is massive here, and I love the fact that you've got these channels now where you can go in and look at this content. I look at the content comments most of the time, because that's the real reflection of what it is that you're putting out there, not just the piece you're putting out there. It's more of a relationship, I think, than a transaction.
So I think, when you're saying about relationship, it's all about having, like you said, the extremes, either love or hate, but not
think-
apathy. Right?
What?
Not having apathy towards the brand, because when
Yeah.
you're in the middle lane,
Yeah.
and if you have apathy, that means there is no resonance, there's no relationship. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Okay.
I believe so, because I think the relationship really should feel balanced. And what I mean by balanced is love and hate is a point of view. We live in a society today that's all about feels. You can fact me as much as you like. 50% of people do this and 80%, I don't care actually. It just doesn't feel right to me. So if we're in a world of feeling over facts, then that balance of love and hate, which seems like a weird thing to say, feels right to be able to build brands in a modern marketing world. And everything else that's happening here is optimizing the part that's not going to get you fired.
Okay.
And the things that are going to become courageous, that people talk about, that win awards, that move products, and all those things that we think that we're going to celebrate with award nights, aren't optimized out. They're moving the human emotion forward, I think.
Okay. That's very ironic. All the statements that you are making seems very contradictory or, going in the other direction to the event that we are at. Adtech, everything about technology. You're talking more about humanizing of brands.
Because if you think about it, advertising technology is incredibly important. At the very end of that is the human who's interacting with it or ignoring it. So if you're building advertising technology to be ignored, fantastic. That would be the terrible brief. But if you're building advertising technology to help my human relationship, when you and I go have a drink on a Friday night, and I say, I have to tell you about this brand I just met, then that's very, very different. That means the brand is doing an incredible job. Whether it's been assisted through advertising technology, or whether it's assisted in a way that feels like an old school human interaction of, tell me about a brand you like. It feels old school, but it feels appropriate today, because otherwise we sit in a world where if you're hit with 1,500 media messages, you're not going to be able to recall any of the media messages you see today. Or are you? But
Not
if
all
you
of
also
them,
open
yeah.
up your browser on your laptop, you've probably got 25 different tabs open.
Correct.
Or if I ask you to open up your Instagram, you've probably got a bunch of things saved in a bunch of folders, and you might get back to it. You've got a bunch of email you haven't read, you've probably got 1,000 emails that you're drowning in, you've probably got 50 WhatsApps you haven't looked at this morning. So tell me how that becomes efficient. That advertising technology that helps humans at the end of it make decisions that betterment their day, from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 at night, or whatever your day feels like, that's what I'm intrigued by.
Okay.
And by the way, there are a ton of those technologies here. It doesn't all have to be spray painted with AI on the back of it. Because AI is just a front end of LLMs, which have been around for forever. We've been in the data world for forever. Cleaner the data, better the relationship you're going to have with the human at the other end of either that screen or that media experience, whatever that is.
Okay.
And more increasingly, it's become a screen,
True.
right?
Right. I would agree
You have
with
one
you.
right in your hand.
Yes, which is hidden, by the way. I have
That is it.
more-
And you're
yes.
writing on a notepad.
Right.
So the world feels very analog and futuristic, and analog and futuristic. And I kind of love that.
Okay.
That's why I think Adtech is still incredibly relevant in terms of what it does. Just don't forget, there's 8 billion people in planet Earth, man. And India is such a great example of that. I remember coming here 10 years ago and thinking, where is this going? Nobody really had laptops. They were all sitting in the shade, you know, having a rest with a phone. And that's their means of connecting. And it's not, and you know, I know you have cheap data plans here and you have the ability to connect, but that's really interesting. If the internet was built by Silicon Valley, India is showing us how it's actually used. It's phenomenal to see it. So if we're going to do it, that advertising technology should be good if we're spending time in front of that screen. And your average is like 4 hours a day just on social media. It's wild.
That's true.
You don't even have all the platforms here. It's nuts.
Absolutely. And you know, you also have this attention which is fragmented, like you correctly said. I would have 15 tabs open on my laptop. You mentor creators, right?
I do, yes.
So when you are mentoring the creators, how
Yeah.
exactly are you telling them that, you know, you need to look for the stories, you need to look for, you know, probably slice through whatever coverings are there, get into that kernel, pull that out and build the whole story around
Yeah.
it, and tune out all the noise of tech, the noise of the screens that you're exposed to?
Yeah, solve the problem. Like, start with what's the problem we're trying to solve. If somebody says to me, start with a blank page, I'm like, oh, well, then I can't solve the brief. There is no starting with a blank page. I'm a creative. I need to solve a problem. What's the problem you need to have solved? And then we can move forward. Because otherwise, it's like, start with a blank page. Of what? So that's the first thing. The second thing is implementing the right way around. There are so many discussions that I have, which is, this is the tool we're using. And I'll ask the question, for solving what problem? So it's inverted. We start with tools, then we say, well, do we have enough technology to implement that tool? Oh, do we have enough skill to implement that? How's our data look? You know, at the very end, we look at it and say, oh, how does it affect the organization? What's it going to do to the culture of this organization if we implement it this way? Why not flip it the other way and say, how do we create a culture in this organization that's curious? And we start with that curious creativity. And at the very bottom, it's like, oh, if we're solving all this and we have good data and we have a lot of technology and maybe some skills, at the very end of that should be, what application are we going to use to solve that? But start with, what is this going to do to our organization, our brand, and the people that we actually want to relate with? It's a very different relationship than just turning around and say, here's 1,000 different tools that I review, which is what I do, by the way. But I find that all to be for what cause? What am I trying to solve? What am I trying to solve? What am I trying to solve? It's a unique opportunity here. I think that India is really paving the way for that opportunity, and not just because it's such a large audience. This marketplace, the fact that you really have gone straight to mobile only, blows my mind how many solutions can be solved here.
True. So, you know, I'm going to go back to what you mentioned earlier about how marketers are now like the chief matrix officer.
complex matrix observer, I would
Complex
say.
matrix observer. And I'll tell you why that word stuck is because I love the movie.
Oh.
All right. And I was just
I only
thinking,
saw the Matrix recently, by the way. I hadn't seen it before.
oh, really? I
Yeah.
mean, you really need to catch up on all of them.
I
So,
do.
And I was just thinking when you said that word and somewhere it was playing in the back of my mind is that it feels like CMOs in the current avatar are like Trinity and Neo trying to, sorry, I would say Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus trying to stay a step ahead of Agent Smith. And your Agent Smith
Oh, I
could
see,
be
I see.
anything.
Yeah, I get you.
Do you think, that Agent Smith is also very amorphous right now? It could be tech on one side, it could be marketing spends on the other side, it could be a consumer feedback on the other side.
Yep.
I'm trying, again, going back to what you did, trying to humanize Agent Smith. Do you think that's the constant battle that they're dealing with?
Yes, it is a constant battle. And the thought path of being one step ahead is only relevant if your product has permission to be there. Because otherwise then it's irrelevant. But here's one thing that I don't think brands do enough. They don't audit their channels enough. Just because somebody, in your analogy, a suit says we need to do this, why? Because that's the way I think we need to do it. We need a TV ad for these reasons, for example. Then you're only marketing to people within an organization who only care about their brand because they're being paid for it. I don't care about your brand because I'm not being paid for it. You do, because you're being paid for it. You're being paid to care about your brand. I have free choice. So I don't think about your brand. I'm not getting paid for it. So if I'm not getting paid to think about a brand, then how do you make me think about a brand? Go and audit the channels where conversations are happening, where community is being built, where relationships feel like I said something here, it created ruffles here, some people love it over here, other people hate it here. Audit that and say, well, that doesn't feel like a channel we should be in, but maybe it's the best channel to be in because people actually are being active, as opposed to a bunch of stuff that comes up, I'm super blind to it, and then it goes away, and then you end up with a report chart that seems like it's just moving the needle ever so slightly, and you're looking to optimize the optimization of the optimized object. And you end up with this thing that says, well, that seems pretty dull. And by the way, I'm going to reduce your advertising budget now because all you're doing is optimizing stuff and we're not getting a result. Then move things emotionally. And let people have word of mouth, peer-to-peer reviews, an old school ability to say, I care what my friends say. Because otherwise, clicking on ads, maybe not the right KPI anymore.
So what you mentioned about the humanizing of advertising, isn't that, again, going back to the genesis of the business? Because that's how it started, right? The whole world of marketing advertising, if you go back centuries also, it was all about a product. Meeting the consumer where they were, whether it was the marketplaces in Egypt or the bazaars of India.
Yeah.
You had a place, you had a product, you knew where your customers are, you knew exactly what your customer was looking for, quality, quantity, price, whatever, and you sold it that way. Now it seems to be over-engineered and over-factored. So with this humanization, are we again going back to the basics?
The basics have never gone away. The technology has been there to justify the basics, I think.
Okay.
So if you're a brand that would be great to be optimized on live shopping between 10 o'clock in the morning and 12 o'clock in the day, then there's platforms that exist for that. How beautiful is that? So we now have the technology catching up with the ideas to connect. Awesome. Does it seem old? Yeah. Because it would have been, let's go do a pop-up over here and see if that thing takes. The thing is, what we're looking for is technology that justifies these experiments. All of it's an experiment. The marketplace you talked about back in the day, that was an experiment. Maybe it was geography-based, but it was still an experiment to say, will people transact and what's the currency of exchange? That currency of exchange today is time. That's the thing that I'm looking at to give you. Will I give you enough time that when I consider a purchase in that category, will you be the first brand of choice?
Good.
Maybe. And I think it doesn't necessarily... The day may come where our agents, which we talked about yesterday, agents talking to agents doing something, great. At the end of that screen is still a human. And that human still has to consume that thing that agent has given agency for. Still.
Okay.
That efficiency path, who cares? We used to call it click-through rate back in the day, and then suddenly it was affiliate links. Look, the two things that people only want to talk about, way over here is AI, which is all of this in the last 48 hours, And way over here it's creators, which has been all of this in the last 48 hours. The bit in the middle is marketing, which is an entire expo based upon it. Working on those two opposites. One is, how do I make this thing more effective using that maybe? That happens to be the modern marketing today. And the rest of it is all about where you place it. Go and build a channel if you think that's important to you, or use the channels that exist. If the channels exist today, then how do you prioritize an intention? What is that intention? Do I want a purchase consideration? Do I want a product review? Do I want to do in real life experience? Do I want to line out the door, somebody get a tchotchke? What are the things that you're trying to do that make that brand matter?
Correct.
Is that new? No. We just try and make it seem very awkward. But we're spending $1 trillion on advertising a year. Let's make it matter.
Okay.
You know?
I agree with you, and I think it's also because we are spending those $1 trillion because there is also an element of FOMO. A lot of time you're just trying to play catch up.
Sure.
You know, you feel that, okay, if X has done this, they have got an agentic tool and I don't have it, I'm missing out on something which I myself don't know, but it's out there and I need to get that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
so maybe
and we will also know that agentic tools today at the coalface, at the actual presentation layer to the consumer in front of the screen, is not new. You know, the ability to chat to somebody. I love these companies that will use a robot for 80% of the chat and say, this is too hard now, I'm going to hand it over to the human to solve that problem.
Okay.
Kind of vibey, man. But if the chatbot got me there much faster than me spending whatever, and that chatbot really feels like an agent, that's kind of a vibe. I'm okay with that. But you know, my point here is that we're not just consumers consuming content. You're not sitting there in the corner scrolling through your day, clicking on a bunch of ads or saving a bunch of stuff. You are now a critic, a curator, a creator, and as somebody who builds brands, I have to think about how I collaborate with you, how I communicate to you. You're not just passively consuming. And those days are well over. We used to have that with new ad technologies. It's not here. We're looking at subtle ways of feeling like we create affinity with you, not authority. Authority is me sitting literally in front of you, saying you must buy this because it's the best. Then get away because I'll make that choice. It's not about that. It's more like stand beside me and say, well, what do you think about that? Okay. I like it. Does it taste good? Maybe. What about the feel? Feels interesting. You know, it's about affinity. It's not about authority. Can't stand in front of people and say, bum, 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 bum. We'll end up with more ad blocking technologies. We already have 1 billion of them installed. There's only 3 billion people on the internet. We just have to be better. And maybe this ad technology right now is the best way of doing it because we have much more efficient tools that create that technology of connection. I don't know.
I agree with you on that. In fact, my last question to you is that I know
Bloody
that you
hell.
take...
This has been an amazing interview, by the way.
Thank you so much.
It's been a lot of ramble around the same thing, which let's keep it simple, you know?
Yeah, and it's been simple. Everything has come back from your session. But what I was trying to understand is, I rather understand from you, is that you've taken a break recently, right? You decided to go rejuvenate yourself because you said there is a lot of noise around marketing, AI, tech, and so on and so forth. Having come back, I think almost a fortnight ago, what are some new inspirations or something that triggered in your mind that needs to be done, which probably is not being done and which we haven't spoken about?
If you are you suggesting that I took a break because I have a weekend off?
I don't know. You have to say that. Your LinkedIn says so.
No. I definitely haven't taken a break, but I've taken time off. And that time off is away from the screens because the most wild thing that we can do is think about the impact of nature.
True.
And nature is the most incredible connection we still have as a sensorial experience. You know, to get away from just being broadcasted at and understand that we're in a tribe of belonging doesn't require technology. It requires the senses to be reestablished. So if I take that theory and apply that to the digital universe, there are only 3 things you have access to today. Story, which I talked about today. Performance, buy one, get one free. Sleep on this mattress for 90 days. You don't like it, send it back. That's performance. But really what you have access to is feel. This is what my brand makes you feel. This is how it feels when you look at it on a screen, which, by the way, we all look exactly the same. We all pull out your phones, I look exactly the same. unless you have the Samsung Flip. But back in the day, they were all different. Now they're all the same. We're all very different looking people, but the device of connection looks the same.
Correct.
So if the thing that I'm intending to connect with feels like my brand, doesn't feel like the platform I'm trying to be on, but it feels like what my brand architecture is, that I think could be something we could learn from connecting with the senses that really nature gives you back. I only say that because I spent some time checking out, Agra, and what an amazing city. And that Taj Mahal thing, it looks like a mirage, man. And it looks like it was built yesterday. It's literally a glistening diamond that when you walk closer to it, comes closer to you. It's a weird, when you walk closer to it, it goes further back, and you walk further back, it comes closer to you. The optical illusions and mathematics of what this country provided back in the day, even now, which is its reputation, is absolutely paramount and worth checking out. That feels like nature combined with man manufacturing in a very modern architecture. It's quite beautiful. I'm not answering your question in a way that feels like is probably what you expected, but
No.
spending time in nature and understanding how you as a human can use those senses to connect, particularly when we're going back on those screens, which is the only time we spend time feeling like we connect, the reconnection of that I think is even more wild than we've experienced in the past.
No, you've actually given me inspiration because of the fact that you're right. One does end up spending a lot of time staring at screens, staring at a lot of words, staring at... After a point, you get blinded and you also get anesthetized, to the whole thing. You stop connecting with what really matters, the more tactile stuff. And if nothing else, you inspire me to take a holiday. Well, David, those are all the questions that I had for you. Thank you so
Thanks
much
for
for
having me.
taking. Yeah, it was lovely talking to you and like
Awesome.
a freewheeling chat.
Thanks very much.
So thank you so much.
Cheers.